Officer Jared Sloan flipped on his cruiser lights the moment he spotted the man. Black, mid-30s, stepping out of a high-end jewelry store with a sleek black case. No alarm, no distress. But Jared didn't need either. Suspicion was stitched into his uniform. He approached with deliberate authority, hand hovering near his holster. The man stood still, calm, extending a receipt like it meant something. Jared didn't look, didn't ask, just said, "Put the case down." No, sir, no explanation. Just command. A woman across the parking lot froze. A man tilted his phone slightly. The crowd didn't intervene. They just observed. Because to them, it looked right. The man was too put together, too confident. And somehow, that made him threatening. Jared shoved him against the cruiser, cuffed him in plain view. No questions, no rights read. "You're making a mistake," the man said, quietly, but Jared was already calling it in, until the frequency snapped alive. "All units, stand down. That's Judge Michael Avery. Repeat, do not detain." Silence fell. A man in cuffs, now holding the entire street still. Because the man Jared arrested wasn't a suspect. He was the youngest federal circuit judge in the state. Harvard Law, DOJ appointed. And soon, he'd be presiding over police misconduct cases, just like this. This isn't a story about protest. It's a story about power, the kind you never see coming. What happens when the man you cuff holds your future in his hands? Drop your guess in the comments, and if that twist hit you hard, hit that subscribe. You'll want to see what happens next. Michael Avery was born in a part of Birmingham where streetlights flickered out long before curfews were enforced, where excellence wasn't a goal, it was a survival strategy. His mother, a night shift professor with tired eyes and iron discipline, raised him between chalk dust and overdue bills. While other kids shouted on cracked basketball courts, Michael read between the shelves of an underfunded library, memorizing court cases instead of players' names. In a world that only noticed black boys when they failed, Michael chose silence, and made it sharp. By the time he turned 35, Michael had helped draft oversight laws that most officers didn't even know governed them. He'd consulted for the Department of Justice, advised internal review panels, and sat across from men 3 times his age who took notes when he spoke. But you'd never recognize him in a crowd. No magazine features, no public lectures, just results. Quiet, relentless, unseen. He once stood before a judge who sneered at his diction, unaware that Michael Ghost wrote federal judicial training handbooks. That sting stayed with him. Not as a scar, but as fuel. He didn't need revenge. He needed reach. Now, Judge Michael Avery walks into detention centers and inner-city classrooms with the same calm he wore in court. He mentors those the system overlooks, because he knows what it feels like to be underestimated in every room he enters. Officer Jared Sloan has never entered a room that didn't adjust to him. He walks with law in his mouth and ego in his stride. Mirrored glasses, tactical belt, and a grin he saves for those who look right. That morning he smiled at a white teen leaving the same store. Hoodie up, backpack full, no questions. Just, "Stay out of trouble, kid." But when Michael stepped out, pressed shirt, composed gaze, jewelry case in hand, Jared's smile vanished. Have you ever felt misjudged before people even knew who you were? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The next chapter? It's where things get uncomfortable. Officer Jared Sloan shifted his weight, hand, still near his holster, and muttered just loud enough for the mic on his vest, "People like this always got an excuse." The words weren't for the man in front of him. They were for the body cam, the record, the narrative he thought he could control. His smirk said more than the badge on his chest. "You fit a description," he said next, squinting, like he was solving some puzzle only he could see. Michael Avery stood motionless, calm, holding out the receipt with quiet certainty. "I just picked up a watch," he said. "Custom order. Paid in full." Jared didn't even glance at it. He stepped forward and slammed Michael against the hood of the cruiser. "Hands behind your back. Don't make this harder." The metal groaned beneath him as the cuffs locked in. A phone rose from behind a car mirror. A woman paused mid-walk and slowly pulled hers from her purse. Not one accusation had been stated. As the cuffs clicked tight, Michael tilted his head. Not toward Jared, but across the street. A woman in a tailored suit stood still, nodded once, and turned down an alley. No one else saw. But Michael did. Near the salon, a stylist stopped mid-conversation, filming quietly. On the bench, a couple shifted away, choosing distance over discomfort. No one spoke, but judgment was thick in the air. "You trying to resist?" Jared barked suddenly. Michael hadn't moved. Still, Jared yanked his wrist upward, forcing a twist. It wasn't restraint, it was spectacle. An older man stepped forward, voice soft but steady. "Is this necessary?" Jared turned, all performative aggression. "You interfering?" The man stepped back, silent, shamed. Michael let out a slow breath. "You might want to double-check what you're escalating." No threat, no fear. Just a calm so deliberate, it felt dangerous. What would you do if someone challenged you publicly based only on assumption? Drop your response in the comments. The next chapter? It's when everything begins to boil. Jared's grip dug into Michael's arm like a challenge he desperately needed to win. "Stop resisting!" he barked, loud enough for every phone in the area to catch it. But Michael hadn't moved. His body remained still, composed. It didn't matter. Jared shoved him forward again, this time slamming his shoulder into the cruiser's hood. The crowd flinched. Gasps bled into the air like smoke. "You think you're special?" Jared hissed into his ear. "One wrong breath, and this gets real." The street froze. Doors that were swinging a second ago stopped. A barista inside the cafe held a foam wand mid-pour. You could feel it, even if no one said it. Something sacred had just cracked. Not with a bang, but a silence too sharp to ignore. "I've complied with everything," Michael said calmly. No rage, no pleading. Just a voice as even as his posture. It wasn't submission. It was control. He reached toward his cuff and adjusted it, just slightly. It looked like nothing, but there was intention in the motion. The woman across the street, same one in the blazer, watched him. Then pulled out her phone and made one call. Nothing dramatic, just a signal. "I've seen him before," someone whispered behind the flower stall. A delivery guy squinted. "Wasn't he in one of those city commercials? You know, diversity hires or whatever?" A weak assumption. Loud enough to land, soft enough to be dismissed. Jared spun Michael toward the open door. "Let's see what story your prints tell." He shoved him forward again. Still no rights, still no reason. Just force. A man near the cafe nodded. Finally. Doing something. But another woman spoke low. "This feels wrong." Now the crowd was splitting. Tension wasn't building. It was breaking. Michael said nothing. He didn't resist. He didn't clarify. He just waited. Still cuffed. Still dignified. A young woman near the courthouse bus stop, lanyard visible, nodded toward him. Her phone was already recording. She didn't speak, but she stayed. Then came the lapel tap. Quick. Intentional. A tiny pin clicked beneath his thumb. Harmless looking. But across the street, a man in a black SUV straightened in his seat, eyes locked on the scene. He turned the key. Jared slammed the door closed hard. "Think staying quiet's gonna save you?" He yanked Michael's collar. The fabric pulled taut. This wasn't protocol. It was provocation. Michael's phone buzzed. A message. "5 minutes out. Keep steady." Across the street, the suited woman nodded. Barely. The shift was already in motion. "Should have kept your hands visible," someone sneered. A few chuckled. Not from joy, from nervous loyalty. Two men near the food truck watched. "He's got priors, I bet." "Yeah, always do." Their tone wasn't curious. It was programmed. Michael slowly reached for something inside his jacket. "Stop!" Jared barked, hand snapping to his holster. Instant freeze. Even the air recoiled. "I saw him," a voice called. "He paid. I was inside." But the crowd didn't move, and Jared didn't care. "Mind your business, sir," he snapped. Not confident, cornered. He could feel it slipping. Across the street, the deli owner passed out waters to the line of customers. Skipped Michael. Didn't even glance his way. What would you do if you were in Michael's place? Would you speak up, or let the silence work in your favor? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if your heart's racing, hit like and subscribe. It's only getting deeper from here. Jared leaned in, nose almost touching Michael's cheek, breath hot with ego and desperation. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed, then jabbed his elbow into Michael's ribs, sharp, sudden, meant to hurt. It wasn't control. It was a message. It looked like police work. It felt like humiliation. "He's being uncooperative," Jared barked to the growing crowd, voice louder now. "Look how he's acting." He searched for agreement. One man nodded weakly. Another turned away. Not because they believed him, because they didn't want to be next. Michael winced, but didn't break. He pulled a breath through the pain and said, clear and controlled, "All I've ever asked for is fairness." The words weren't loud, but across the street, someone zoomed in. A woman with her phone whispered, "Did you hear that?" Michael took one step toward the open back door of the cruiser. "Surrender," the crowd assumed. But then he stopped, turned, and walked back toward Jared. Not angry, just aligned with something deeper than rage. The street stilled. "Don't ignore me," Jared snapped. He lunged and yanked Michael's jacket, open. A gold pen hit the pavement. The sleeve tore. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. This wasn't control anymore. It was unraveling. "That crossed a line," someone said. "That's assault," muttered a man recording. Eyes sharpened. Phones steadied. This wasn't background noise anymore. Michael's voice dropped low. "You just made a mistake. A public one." Jared shoved him again. "Enough with the tone," he spat. But this time no one laughed. No one looked away. "What do you think the protagonist should do next? Should he stay silent, or let the truth shake the room? Let us know in the comments. If you're still here, you'll want to see what happens in the next chapter." Michael Avery looked Jared dead in the eye, calm, unblinking, and said, with a voice that didn't need to rise to command the room, "I've tolerated enough." No flinch, no shift in posture, no raised tone. But the words landed like a gavel, not a warning, a line, and it had just been crossed. Jared scoffed, his voice sharper now, his mask of control thinning. "You're the one making this complicated," he said, glancing at the crowd as if they still believed him. "We could have handled this quietly." But the words no longer sounded like law. They sounded like fear trying to hold its ground. Across the street, someone filming slowly lowered their phone. A woman leaned to whisper to her friend, "This man's not scared. He's something else." The attention had shifted, not to the badge, to the man wearing cuffs who didn't fold. Then Michael reached into his pocket, deliberately, slowly, and placed something on the cruiser hood. A smooth black card, no writing, just the glint of gold-embossed detail. Jared didn't see it, but a man in the crowd did, and stopped mid-step. From the sidewalk, a figure in a courthouse ID stepped forward. Michael gave the faintest nod. "Can you hand this to that officer over there?" he asked, barely audible. The man obeyed, took the card, walked it to a plainclothes figure near a street lamp, That man looked up, tensed, whispered something into his collar. The energy shifted again. Someone wasn't a stranger. Jared noticed the movement, eyes flicking, breath catching. "Who are you texting? What is this?" He tried to sound firm, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "I can document the rest," a voice offered from beside Michael. The woman with the courthouse lanyard, her phone still recording, her voice steady, her presence intentional. Michael turned toward the crowd, speaking for the first time like they were part of this too. "This was never about rules," he said. "It's about what you thought you saw." The sentence landed like a verdict, and no one looked away. Then Jared muttered, under his breath but not under the microphones, "People like that don't belong in places like this." The words slipped out like reflex, but they didn't go unnoticed. They landed on a dozen phone cameras. Too clear to deny, too late to delete. For a beat, no one spoke. Even the noise of the street held its breath. The man in cuffs no longer looked small. He looked unshaken, while the officer looked unsure. Michael turned back to Jared. Calm, still. "You overlooked one thing," he said, then nodded towards the circle of onlookers. "Everything you've done is being recorded. Not a threat, not a warning, just the truth, carried on camera lenses and silent judgment. What would you do in this situation? Would you stay calm, speak up, or walk away? Comment your thoughts below, and if this moment hit home, hit like and subscribe." Everything stopped. The hiss of an espresso wand froze mid-screech. A teen lowered his earbuds, sentence caught in his throat. Across the street, a woman in heels paused, lowering her sunglasses, gaze locked. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was recognition. Something was happening. Near the stoplight, a man in a dark gray suit shifted. One step forward, calm, deliberate. He didn't speak, didn't wave. But high above, a rooftop camera operator nodded back. They weren't tourists. They were waiting. Michael reached into his jacket, not rushed, not afraid. He set a slim device on the cruiser's hood. Face down. A soft blue pulse glowed once. Across the street, someone stood straighter. The ones who doubted no longer did. Jared's voice cracked. "What are you doing?" Too quick, too loud. He heard himself losing control. Michael didn't flinch, didn't look at him. He spoke to the street. "You'll understand soon enough. If you think the antagonist's reaction was uncalled, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more justice stories like this." "He's way too calm," a voice murmured from the crowd. Another added, "You don't think he's someone?" The murmurs cracked the illusion. What once looked like control now reeked of assumption. Doubt bloomed, quiet but undeniable. The woman in the courthouse. Lanyard stepped forward without hesitation. She reached into her blazer and handed Michael a silver badge wallet. No fanfare, no words. Just gravity in her eyes. He took it without looking at her, like the move had been practiced. Michael flipped the wallet open and gently placed it on the hood of the cruiser. No dramatic gesture, just stillness. Inside, a Department of Justice ID. Judicial Circuit Authority, embossed in gold. It didn't need to be explained. It only needed to be seen. The gasps didn't come all at once. They rippled. Two black SUVs pulled up behind the crowd. The engines humming like thunder wrapped in leather. 4 men stepped out in suits. One of them, Agent Ramirez, didn't blink. Just nodded once toward Michael. That nod hit like a seismic shift. "This man is not a suspect," Ramirez said to the crowd, holding up a federal folder. "He's the newly appointed lead on federal police oversight for this entire region." Phones erupted. So did history. "That's him," someone whispered. "Judge Michael Avery. I've seen his rulings online." Now everyone knew. I've been reviewing misconduct across precincts, Michael said. No press, no warning. I wanted to see how you act when you think no one's watching. Jared stammered. I didn't know who you were. But no one answered. Because now no one cared. All patrol activities are suspended, Ramirez said. Jared's radio buzzed once, then went silent. Authority had shifted. Michael didn't gloat. He stepped aside and let the system do what it never did for him. 2 agents arrived, briefcases in hand, sealed files, body cam footage, digital receipts. They hadn't come for a maybe. They came prepared. You never asked who I was, Michael said, facing Jared directly. You assumed. The crowd didn't cheer. They nodded. They clapped once, twice. Respectful. Measured. You chose bias, Michael added. Now you'll face truth. Jared looked around. His partner had already stepped back. He was alone, cornered by silence and accountability. He made a small shift toward his cruiser, but every lens moved with him. Remain where you are, Ramirez said. You're under internal review. A federal voice added. Your badge is revoked, effective now. And you'll report to the Civilian Oversight Division, another agent followed. Pending charges. This wasn't personal, Jared whispered, voice barely audible. His hands hung useless by his side. It became personal, Michaels said. The moment you made it public. He turned to the crowd. To those who stayed silent but stayed aware, thank you. His eyes met the woman in the lanyard. She nodded. Nothing more. But everything was said. As Michael stepped into the SUV, the LED billboard across the street flickered to life. Honor Judge Michael Avery, U.S. Federal Oversight Chair. A young officer nearby blinked hard. Now, they all knew. Do you think Officer Jared deserves forgiveness or should face the full consequences? Let us know in the comments. And if this reveal hit you hard, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes silence equals weakness. 2 days later, as Michael stepped through the courthouse doors, a young man held it open. I've never seen someone win without yelling, he said. It wasn't loud, but it stayed with him. The footage had spread, millions watching not because it was loud, but because it never needed to be. Power isn't posture, Michael told a reporter. It's what you do when you don't need to prove it. To those who'd been misjudged, he offered this. Stay still. Your silence will speak for you. Later he passed that same jewelry store. A new officer stood outside. Welcome, sir. Different eyes, different tone. In another city, Jared sat alone in a mandatory bias training. No badge. But this time, he was listening. Far from it all, in a quiet D.C. room, Michael opened a sealed folder. Label, Phase 2, National Oversight Initiative. It wasn't the end. It was the assignment. Legacy isn't built in noise, he said softly, walking out. It's built in what they remember, after the silence. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to know. Dignity isn't given. It's owned. And when justice arrives, it doesn't shout. It stands.